moon hung high over the rugged landscape of Cedar Creek Ranch, casting a silver light onto the vast expanse of land. The night was alive with the sounds of nature crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the slight breeze, and the distant howl of a coyote. Everything seemed calm, but for Ethan, a seasoned ranch hand, something felt off. A chill pricked at the edges of his senses, strong enough to make him stop and squint into the darkness ahead. He was finishing up a long day, his hands rough and calloused from years of hard work, when he heard it, a soft whimpering. The sound twisted in his gut, stealing his breath. It came from the woods beyond the barn, where shadows stretched like dark fingers, beckoning him closer. Ethan squinted into the inky blackness, wondering if his ears were playing tricks on him. He shook his head and tightened his grip on the lantern hanging from his belt. Curiosity mingled with a gnawing sense of dread. As he stepped away from the safety of the barn's light, the world transformed around him. The soft glow behind him faded, replaced by darkness pressing in on all sides. He pushed through the underbrush, the crunch of twigs beneath his heavy boots blending with the persistent sound of the weeping. Each step pulled him deeper into an unsettling mystery. He called out, his voice firm but laced with uncertainty. The whimpering paused, and silence fell like a thick blanket. His heart raced. What if he had imagined it all? Just as he considered turning back, he heard it again, a soft, desperate cry that tugged at something deep within him. With renewed urgency, he followed the sound, weaving through thick trees and gnarled branches, his mind racing. What kind of trouble could someone be in out here? Was it a lost hiker or something far worse? He pressed on, driven by instincts honed through years of working the ranch. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, half believing it might help reassure whoever was in trouble. The crying grew louder as he moved, pulsing through the quiet night like a beating heart. Suddenly, Ethan stumbled into a small clearing. The moonlight spilled onto the ground, illuminating a tall oak tree, its thick branches stretching upward like arms pleading to the skies. And there, nestled among the sturdy limbs, sat a girl, no older than 10, her tear-streaked face barely visible in the muted light. She was clinging to a branch, her small body trembling as she sobbed. Ethan shouted, the raw emotion catching in his throat. "Are you okay?" The girl froze, her wide eyes locking onto his. For a moment, time seemed to hang in the air between them, thick with the weight of emotion. Then she choked out a sob, her tiny body shaking violently now. She cried, her voice tiny and fragile. Ethan took a cautious step closer. "It's okay, I'm here to help you," he said. His heart raced, but he kept his tone steady, trying to sound comforting. "Leela," she managed, her voice breaking as she wiped at her tears. "Oh no." Ethan knelt beneath the tree, trying to catch her gaze. "Leela, I'm going to help you down." But as he glanced up, assessing how he might rescue her, the sight of her clutching the branch made his stomach twist. She looked so small, so lost. He wished he could reach out, but he could only call to her, a lifeline in the dark. He asked, his heart pounding louder than the rustling leaves, "Just look at me and breathe." The girl nodded hesitantly, but her grip tightened on the branch. The glow of the lantern painted her delicate features in a tender light, illuminating her fear and vulnerability. "I can't move," she whispered, her voice shaking like the leaves around them. Ethan thought quickly, glancing back into the shadows as if her puppy might leap out any moment. "What if I tell you a story?" Her eyes darted to him, flickering with curiosity amid the fear. "Yep, it can be about anything you want. Just focus on my voice." He took a deep breath and began, weaving tales of vast green fields and brave animals embarking on adventures. With each word, he noticed Leela's expression softening, her small body no longer trembling quite as hard. He knew this wouldn't fix things, but it was something, a thread woven into the fabric of their unraveling moment. In the distance, a low howl echoed through the trees, sending a shiver racing down his spine. Leela flinched, and Ethan hurriedly pressed on, telling her of a courageous puppy who fought off the shadows and saved his family from peril. The rhythm of his voice blended with the soft night sounds, an almost magical barrier against the encroaching darkness. And then the puppy leapt bravely over the creek, splashing through the cold water until he found his way back. Ethan continued, gauging her response. Just then he heard it again, the howl, closer this time. The chill intensified, and he could feel something primal stirring at the edges of his awareness. "Leela, listen to me. Can you try to climb down just a little? I promise you're safe," he pressed, his heart racing for both of them. She hesitated, tears still glistening in her eyes, but then slowly she nodded. Little by little, she began to inch down the branch, just as Ethan had hoped. With each cautious movement, a flicker of light sparked in his heart. They were making progress. The branches creaked softly under her weight, but as she reached out a tiny hand, there was a sudden rustle in the underbrush, and his heart sank. He turned just in time to see dark shapes moving through the trees, shadows that shouldn't belong, the wild things of the night lurking, drawn by the cries of a child. "Leela," he urged, voice laced with urgency. "Get down." She climbed faster now, a rush of determination seeping into her small frame, but the darkness felt alive, almost hungry. Ethan's instincts kicked in, adrenaline surging through him as he shifted, positioning himself beneath her to catch her. He commanded, the shadows closing in. With a final leap, Leela fell and he caught her, her small weight colliding against him like a breath of relief. But there was no time to waste. With a sharp instinct for survival, he turned and bolted, carrying her swiftly away from the ominous rustling filling the woods. They stumbled into the clearing where the barn lights glimmered in the distance like a beacon. Leela clung tightly to Ethan, her small frame trembling against him, but there was a fire in her eyes, courage blooming where fear once ruled. They reached the safety of the barn. Ethan pushed through the door, slamming it shut behind them. The darkness outside fell silent, like a pause before the storm. Inside, the familiar sense of hay and leather wrapped around them, offering comfort in the wake of terror. Leela whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned the dimly lit space. Ethan nodded, catching his breath. "You're safe now." He found a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders, feeling the warmth beneath the cool fabric. The night was thick with tension, but they had made it. The danger had lifted, and the weight of the woods couldn't reach them anymore. But as he looked down at Leela, the exhaustion washed over both of them, flickering out like the dimming light of the lantern. The ranch noise faded, replaced by their shared silence, the silence of a moment suspended by fear and the threads of hope that had stitched them together in the darkness. She asked, her voice still small but filled with something brighter. Ethan smiled softly, feeling an unexpected wave of relief wash over him. "Of course I can. This time, let's talk about your puppy." And as he spoke, painting a vivid image of a brave puppy on his own adventure, Leela nestled into the warmth of the blanket, safe from the shadows. For in that quiet moment, they both learned something: fear could chase you into the depths of the woods, but courage could just as easily guide you home. The night was silent, thick with the kind of stillness that curls around your heart. Ethan, a rugged ranch hand, stood by the barn, the golden glow of the lantern flickering softly against the wooden walls. He wiped the sweat from his brow, the scent of hay and earth rising around him. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, winding down after a long day of work under the wide-open sky. But then he heard it, a soft, trembling cry rising from the depths of the woods. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks, rustling the leaves in a way that mimicked human emotion. Yet the sound grew more distinct, a heart-wrenching whimper that twisted his gut and sent a shiver down his spine. Ethan called out tentatively, his voice breaking through the stillness like a knife. He peeked into the darkness where the trees loomed, their thick branches intertwining like the fingers of giants. The crying continued, pulling him like a magnet deeper into the shadows. What could possibly be out there crying in such despair? His instincts kicked in. As a ranch hand, he had faced rattlers and storms, but nothing prepared him for the haunting sound that echoed through the night. Ethan gripped the lantern, the warm light casting flickering shadows on the ground. He felt an unsettling mix of emotions: curiosity, apprehension, but also an undeniable urge to help. He called again, this time stronger, more certain. His heart pounded in his chest as he took cautious steps into the thicket, the crunch of leaves and twigs beneath him seeming deafening in the quiet night. The whimpering grew louder, its urgency quickening his pace. Drawing nearer, Ethan could see the faint outline of trees stretching high into the sky, their gnarled branches creating a canopy over him. A chill swept through the air, an omen of all that waited ahead. "Stay calm," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. He had no idea what or who he was about to find, but the sound was too painful to ignore. With every step, his breath quickened, anticipation bubbling like a spring. Finally, he stumbled into a clearing bathed in the pale light of the moon. There, in the crook of a sprawling oak, was a small form of girl, no older than 10, her thin frame huddled against the rough bark. Tears streamed down her cheeks, glistening under the moonlight, and his heart plummeted at the sight. Ethan asked urgently, taking in her frightened expression. "What happened?" she cried, her voice a raw whisper. It twisted his stomach to hear so much sorrow in such a small sound. The fear in her eyes was palpable, and Ethan's heart ached for her. Okay, just hold on." He looked up, surveying the sturdy branches that held her captive. They were too high for him to simply reach out and lift her down. His thoughts raced, searching for a solution. He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just take your time." The girl shook her head vigorously. No, he could feel her panic radiating through the air. "Listen," he said, taking a step back. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." In that moment, the connection between them sparked. She looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance. This little girl was alone in the dark, holding onto a branch like it was the only thing keeping her safe. In reality, it was the very thing keeping her trapped. Ethan asked gently, hoping to soothe her. "Leela," she whispered, her voice small. "Okay, Leela, you are brave and I believe in you. I'm going to climb up and help you down." Tears glistened in her eyes, but she nodded slowly, lifting her chin slightly as if drawing strength from his words. Ethan steeled himself, reaching up to grab a lower branch. He carefully hoisted himself up, focusing all his energy on Leela. With each move, he could feel the cool air wrapping around him, but it was nothing compared to the knot of determination tightening in his chest. "Look at me, Leela. You can do this," he encouraged as he climbed higher, his heart pounding louder with every inch he gained. But as he inched closer, the underbrush below rustled ominously, sending a fresh wave of dread washing over him. His instincts screamed danger. He needed to hurry. He stretched his arms, feeling the gap between them close. She looked down, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan could hear the fear in her breath. "You won't, I promise." He reached further out, closer to her, finally able to see her trembling hands clutching the branch. Her fingers were small and fragile, wrapped so tightly around it as if it were a lifeline. She exclaimed again, but there was something different in her voice now. An ember of courage flickered just beneath the surface. "I know you are. But you're stronger than you think, Leela. You can do this. I'm right here and I won't let you go," he said firmly, grounding his voice with conviction. At last, Leela took a shaky breath, summoning her strength. "Okay." With a burst of determination, she slowly reached out, her tiny fingers brushing against his. "Good, now just hold on tight," she whispered, fear and bravery intertwined in her tone. 1, 2. With that, he caught her wrist and Leela released her grip on the branch. They fell together, crashing down onto the soft earth. Ethan tucked himself around her, shielding her from the impact, gasping for breath as he landed hard, the world spinning for a moment. They both lay in the grass, the moon washing over them, illuminated by the stark glow of survival. Ethan looked down at Leela, her eyes wide with astonishment, mingling with confusion. They had made it. They were safe. "Did we?" she gasped, her voice trembling with both fear and relief. "Yes, Leela," he exclaimed, lifting her up into a seated position. They breathed together, the fear that had gripped her starting to release its hold. The danger lurking in the darkness now seemed a distant memory. But then, as if the night had been holding its breath all along, they heard it, a deep growl rumbling from the shadows behind them. Ethan's heart dropped. It had slipped his mind, the wildlife that stirred when night fell. He turned, adrenaline surging through him like a wildfire. He saw 2 glowing eyes and his instincts kicked back in, parents' protective instincts roaring alive. He said, shielding her with his body, his heart racing. The growl came again, this time closer, mixed with the rustle of leaves. Suddenly, a shadow darted through the trees, a large creature half hidden in the gloom. It moved with a powerful grace, its padded feet silent against the forest floor. Ethan growled, ready for anything. He made himself a barrier against whatever danger approached, but to his surprise, the shadowy figure broke through the underbrush and came to an abrupt stop just short of them, a dog panting and wagging its tail furiously. Leela's eyes lit up. a mix of surprise and joy driving away the shadows of fear. She squealed, scrambling forward. Ethan gasped, still on high alert. The dog, with shaggy fur and bright eyes, bounded toward Leela, pressed against her, licking her cheeks with enthusiasm. Laughing, Leela hugged him tight, the simple joy radiating from them like a beacon in the dark. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, but the weariness didn't leave him yet. He asked, watching as the dog practically jumped into her arms. "Yes." Leela cried, her laughter infectious, breaking the tension that hung heavy in the air. Ethan couldn't help but smile as the two shared a reunion, her face illuminated once again, chasing away the echoes of their earlier terror. His heart swelled at the sight, and for a moment he forgot the fear that had gripped them both. He could only marvel at how love and companionship could outshine even the darkest of fears, but they still needed to get out of the woods. "All right, brave one," he said, tapping into his protective instinct again. "Let's get you home." As they made their way back to the barn, the night felt different. The shadows no longer loomed so ominously, transformed by the warmth of their shared laughter and the fluttering relief that enveloped them. It was still dark, but the moon hung high above them, illuminating their path and making it seem almost magical. Leela walked beside him, her small hand in his, feeling like a promise of hope amid the chill of the night. "Thank you for saving me," she said softly, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," Ethan replied, glancing down at her with warmth filling his heart. Her courage had inspired him, driving him to give everything he had. As they reached the barn, Leela squeezed his hand tightly. "Can we tell everyone about the adventure, about Max?" Ethan chuckled lightly, the weariness of the night fading away with her words. "Absolutely. This will be a story for the ages," he said, opening the barn door, the familiar smell of hay enveloping them. In that moment, as they stepped into the safety of the barn, he understood something important. Life could bring darkness and fear, but within that darkness, courage could spark and light the way home. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to face the shadows, you just might find joy waiting on the other side. The night was thick with silence, a stillness that draped over Cedar Ridge Ranch like an old, worn blanket. Shadows danced under the pale light of a full moon, casting ghostly shapes across the wide expanse of open land. Ethan, a seasoned ranch hand, leaned against the barn, enjoying a rare moment of peace after a long day. Just the sounds of crickets, the occasional rustle of leaves, and the distant call of coyotes, a comforting symphony of the wild. But then it happened. A soft, plaintive cry broke through the tranquility. Ethan's heart jolted, the sound striking him like a thunderclap. It was muffled yet unmistakable, a desperate whimper coming from the woods at the far edge of the ranch. He felt a pull deep within him, an instinct that stirred with urgency. He called out, the words echoing softly in the stillness. His own voice felt strange in the quiet night. What could possibly be out there? Anxiety prickled at his skin as the wailing continued, growing more pronounced. This wasn't an animal, it was something far more troubling. Without thinking, he pushed away from the barn, the light behind him fading into darkness as he ventured toward the noise. Each step felt heavy, weighed down by anticipation and fear. The fragrant scent of pine filled the air as he crossed into the woods, the shadows swallowing him whole. He called again, his voice cutting through the trees, but the only answer was the choked sobbing that sent chills down his spine. The sound twisted, tugging at the corners of his heart, pulling him deeper into the thicket. The world around him transformed. A sense of dread settled in his gut as he navigated the uneven ground, branches grazing against him like skeletal fingers reaching for something lost. He shouted, desperation edging his tone. With every cautious step, the moon filtered through the treetops, illuminating his path just enough to keep him moving forward. Finally, he broke through the underbrush and stumbled into a small clearing. The moon shone bright, casting a silvery glow over the scene. There, perched high in the branches of an ancient oak tree, sat a girl no more than 10 years old. Her tear-streaked face was lit by the haunting glow, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and despair. Ethan shouted, his heart racing. "What are you doing up there?" The girl looked down at him, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. "I can't get down," she cried, her small body trembling against the rough bark of the tree. Ethan felt a rush of empathy wash over him. Okay, don't panic. He could see the tears pooling in her eyes. Leela, she whispered, her voice shaky. All right, Leela, I want you to take a deep breath. He scanned the tree. Its branches were thick and gnarled, stretching toward the sky with heavy limbs that felt both supportive and daunting. He asked, trying to keep his tone calm. The fear in her eyes held him captive as she shook her head. No. It's too high. I understand, Ethan replied, heart aching for her, but we can do this together. He stepped closer to the base of the tree, his mind racing. He had faced many challenges in his life, but this moment felt different. He was responsible for this scared little girl, and he had to find a way to bring her home safely. He asked, keeping his eyes locked on hers, if you can at least try to move a little lower, I'll catch you. For a brief moment, Leela hesitated, fear flickering across her face. But then, in a burst of courage, she nodded. Slowly, she shifted her weight, inching down the branch. Ethan held his breath, every nerve ending alert as she moved carefully, one small step at a time. But the woods, once calm, had begun to stir around them. A sudden rustle from the bushes made him turn, icy dread clawing at his insides. Shadows played tricks on his mind, and he strived to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping into his thoughts. He urged, trying to focus on her movements. With a small grunt, Leela slid lower, her tiny hands gripping the branch awkwardly. Ethan could see the tension in her arms, the fear of falling as her feet dangled above the ground. Then came the howl, a low, guttural sound echoing from the depths of the woods, a cold reminder of the dangers lurking out there. Leela froze, eyes wide with terror. Don't look. Ethan shouted, and the urgency in his voice seemed to break through her panic. She nodded, determination flickering like a candle in the wind. On three, I want you to jump into my arms, he instructed, adrenaline surging through him. Leela said, her voice gaining strength. 1, 2. With that, she let go, tumbling down into his waiting arms. Ethan caught her, her small weight colliding against him, the impact almost knocking him off balance. Together, they landed softly in the tall grass. For a moment, they lay there, both gasping for breath, hearts racing in the stillness. Relief flooded through Ethan as he sat up, looking down at Leela, whose eyes sparkled with pure joy and disbelief. She whispered, her voice shaky but filled with wonder. Yes. Ethan chuckled, his heart swelling with pride for her resilience. But just as he began to relax, that familiar growl rumbled through the trees again, louder this time, a chilling reminder that danger could still be lurking. Ethan's heart sank, instincts kicking back into gear as he turned to face the unseen threat. He called to Leela, his voice firm, masking the rising tension inside him. The rustling grew louder, and from the shadows emerged a large creature, its eyes gleaming ominously in the dim light. Fear clamped down on his chest as he readied himself. Leela asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's senses heightened. Just stay behind me, he advised, taking a protective stance. The creature stepped forward, its form slowly becoming clearer. But instead of a menacing beast, a scruffy dog bounded into the clearing, panting and wagging its tail uncontrollably. Leela shouted, breaking into a smile as the dog rushed to her, jumping around excitedly. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, a wave of relief washing over him as the tension dissipated. He asked, bewildered at the unexpected turn of events. "He's my puppy," Leela exclaimed, kneeling to embrace Max, her laughter ringing through the night air, a sweet melody that clarified everything. Ethan watched as the bond between the girl and her puppy brought light back into the darkened world. For those few moments, the fear faded, replaced by the warmth of familiarity and love. "All right, let's get you and Max home," he said, standing up and offering her a hand. As they started back toward the ranch, the night felt different. The shadows no longer loomed large or threatening. They became an enchanting part of the adventure. The moon hung high above them, illuminating their path while the comforting voices of nature surrounded them. Leela exclaimed, her enthusiasm contagious. Her exuberance brought a smile to Ethan's face, lightening the weight he felt in his chest. "I was just doing what anyone would do," he replied, but deep down he knew the truth. It was her bravery that had inspired him. As they neared the barn, Ethan felt a sense of triumph swell within him. The world could be a wild place, full of unexpected horrors and beauty all at once. But this was one night where their courage met the darkness head-on, and they had emerged victorious. When they reached the barn, the familiar warmth of home enveloped them. Ethan pushed open the door and stepped inside, the comforting scent of hay and leather wrapping around them. He felt a sense of pride as Leela clutched Max, the little girl who had faced her fears and won, her hair tangled and eyes wide with excitement. She asked, bouncing on her toes. Leaning against the wall, Ethan chuckled softly. Absolutely. And as they shared laughter, the breeze wafted through the barn, brushing against their skin like a tender reminder of the night's events. In that moment, Ethan knew they wouldn't just carry this story forward. It would shape them, teach them about bravery, trust, and the bonds that could form in the darkness. The thrumming of their hearts began to synchronize, a quiet reminder that even in the wildest of nights, the power of connection could illuminate the path home. As Ethan watched Leela's face glow with joy, he felt grateful for the turn of fate that had led him here. They had ventured into the woods that night, finding something far more precious than courage, companionship, and the promise of new beginnings. The night was thick with silence, the kind that wraps around you, making the last light of day vanish into an oppressive dark. Ethan, a rugged ranch hand with a heart as vast as the wide-open sky, leaned against the weathered barn, breathing in the scent of hay and freshly tilled earth. The ranch sprawled out before him like a familiar old friend, the quiet broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a rooster. Then, without warning, he heard it, a soft, piercing cry cutting through the stillness like a knife. It was a sound tinged with fear, a desperate whimper that sent a jolt through his heart. Who could be making that noise out here? The ranch was remote, surrounded by dense woods that had swallowed countless stories over the years. He felt an urgency grasp him by the throat, pushing him away from the safety of the barn and toward the shadows that loomed in the distance. He called out, the word evaporating into the night air. The response was silence, followed by another muffled cry. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, steeling himself. Taking a deep breath, he remembered the survival tales shared by his father long ago about listening to the woods and trusting your instincts. With each step he took, the night enveloped him, shadows dancing around him as he moved through the thicket. He shouted, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Is it a lost animal, a hiker? Anxiety clawed at him, and for a moment he thought about turning back. But the wailing pulled at him, digging deep into his gut. Pushing through the underbrush, he reached a clearing where the moonlight spilled down like liquid silver, illuminating the trunks of ancient trees. There, high up in the crook of an old oak, he saw her, a small girl no older than 10, clinging to a branch, her face streaked with tears. Ethan called, his heart racing. "What are you doing up there?" The girl looked down, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "I can't get down," she cried, her voice trembling like the branches around her. "Okay, don't panic," Ethan called up to her. He assessed the tree, every gnarled branch stretched toward the sky. It was a tall one, the kind that seemed to whisper secrets to the stars. He shouted, keeping his voice calm to prevent further fright. "Leela," she whimpered. "All right, Leela, I want you to listen to me," Ethan asked, trying to steady his own nerves. Her little body trembled as she shook her head. "It's too high, just take a deep breath. If you can just move down a little bit, I'll catch you." He could see the fear in her eyes, felt it radiating through the air like a heavy fog. It wasn't just about getting her down, it was about restoring her sense of safety. She cried, desperation in her voice. The sobs echoed through the clearing, cutting deep into Ethan's heart. "Leela, I know you're scared, but I'm here." He looked around at the darkness closing in, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. With hesitant movements, Leela shifted, inching down the branch. Ethan held his breath, feeling the adrenaline pulse through his veins. She climbed down cautiously, her small limbs quaking with fear, and for a moment he feared she'd slip back into the darkness. Then a rustling from the bushes nearby sent a wave of dread crashing over him. Shadows shifted in the underbrush, and Ethan felt every instinct scream for him to protect her. "Leela, keep moving." The girl pressed forward, trembling as she finally got low enough that Ethan could reach out. He stretched his arms as far as he could, locking his gaze on her. "On 3, I need you to jump. 1, 2. She let go, and in an instant he caught her, a rush of small warmth and weight. They landed heavily in the grass, and Ethan rolled to cushion her fall. For a moment, everything was still. The cry of a distant owl echoed through the night as they both lay there, hearts pounding. Leela gasped, her eyes wide as she looked up at him, disbelief washing over her tiny face. "Yes," he exclaimed, feeling the exhilaration flood his chest. But just as he started to relax, a deep growl rippled through the clearing, the sound echoing like thunder. Ethan shot up, adrenaline rushing through him again. He turned to see a large, shadowy figure emerging from the trees. Ethan's heart raced. Was it a bear? Maybe a coyote? He commanded, his protective instincts kicking in full force. Leela clung to him tightly, her little fingers digging into his jacket. The low growl came again, and he braced himself for whatever was about to happen. Then, out of the shadows burst a scruffy dog, a golden retriever mix, bounding towards them with a wagging tail and a tongue lolling out of its mouth. It looked almost comically friendly against the backdrop of their fear. Leela cried, her expression immediately transforming from terror to joy. The dog jumped around her, barking excitedly as if he'd won the greatest prize in the world. Ethan asked, torn between relief and a chuckle at the absurdity of it all. "Yes," Leela said, burying her face in the dog's fur, her tears soaking into his scruffy coat. The sight pulled at Ethan's heartstrings, a beautiful blend of worry morphing into joy in an instant. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest as Leela laughed, the fear that had cocooned them earlier slipping away like the last bits of daylight. "All right, we need to get back to the ranch before any more surprises find us in these woods," he suggested, his voice steadying now that the immediate danger had passed. "Can we tell everyone about the adventure?" Leela beamed up at him, the wonder filling her eyes like stars illuminating the night sky. He replied, amused by her enthusiasm but also deeply touched that she saw his efforts as a hero's deed. As they walked back toward the ranch, the weight of the night began to lift. Together they moved through the underbrush with Max leading the way, tail wagging like a flag of victory. They shared tales of what had just happened, laughter bubbling up as they exchanged stories. "That tree was so tall," Leela exclaimed, her courage growing with every step. Ethan chuckled. "But you didn't. You were like a little squirrel climbing down." As they neared the barn, the warm glow of the lights seeped through the cracks, making the ranch feel like a sanctuary. The familiar scents welcomed them home, the comforts of safety enveloping them like a soft blanket. "When I was up in that tree, I thought nobody would find me," Leela confessed quietly, her voice slipping into seriousness for a moment. Ethan's heart ached at her words. "You weren't alone, Leela. You were always within reach." Her small hand reached for his, and he held it tightly. "Thank you for believing in me," she said, a soft sincerity shining in her eyes. As they entered the barn, the solid structure surrounding them evoked a sense of relief as if they had defeated the shadows together. Ethan gently knelt down beside her, their eyes level. He asked. Leela nodded earnestly. "Yes, we did, and that's something you'll carry with you," he said, bringing warmth to his steady voice. "Never forget that you can face what frightens you." In that moment, Leela's laughter rang out, a bright contrast to the shadows outside. And as they stood together in the barn, stories born from fear turned into tales of triumph, echoing through the night. They had lit a fire that wouldn't easily extinguish, one of courage and companionship that would continue to burn brightly in their souls. As the moon climbed high above, bathing Cedar Ridge in silver light, Ethan knew this night would be etched in their memories forever. A night when bravery had taken root, transforming fear into something beautiful. It was no longer just a rural legend. Now it was their story, alive and shimmering, a thread woven into the tapestry of their lives. They would remember how they had faced the unknown, how a single cry had led to an unexpected adventure, a reminder that even in the darkest forests, light can be found, waiting for those brave enough to search for it. The sun was setting over Cedar Creek Ranch, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Ethan, a rugged ranch hand with dirt under his nails and a heart that beat in time with the land, took a moment to appreciate the beauty. He leaned against the fence, watching the horses graze peacefully in the golden light. Just another day winding down, he thought. But then came the sound of a soft cry drifting from the woods, breaking the serene ambience like a stone tossed into still water. At first, Ethan dismissed it as a figment of his imagination, maybe a trick of the wind. But then it came again, a shuddering sob that sent a thrill of unease through him. His heart quickened, recognizing the unmistakable sound of someone in distress. He called, his voice steady against the encroaching shadows. The only reply was the rustling of leaves, the wind whispering secrets he couldn't decipher. Ethan felt the weight of something heavy in his gut, an urge to investigate drawing him away from the familiar safety of the barn. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the tall grass toward the dark outline of the woods. The trees loomed like sentinels, and as he stepped into the coolness, the sounds of the ranch faded behind him, replaced by a ghostly quiet. Each step felt heavier, as if the earth itself was reluctant to share its secrets. "Hello," he shouted again, his voice amplified by desperation. The crying grew louder, a heart-wrenching sound that twisted in his gut. He urged, pushing deeper into the thicket. Finally, he burst into a small clearing bathed in the fading light. A grand old oak tree stood at its center, its branches bowed with age. And there, tucked among those branches, was a small figure, a girl no older than 10, her blonde hair tangled and her face streaked with tears. Ethan called up, the sight sending a rush of adrenaline through him. "What are you doing up there?" The girl looked down at him, her eyes wide with fear. She cried, her voice trembling. Okay, don't panic," he replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "Leela," she whispered, her tiny voice almost lost in the branches. "Leela, I'm Ethan." He scanned the tree, the gnarled limbs reaching out like crooked fingers. Leela shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's too high. Sure you can, you just have to take your time," he said, trying to stay upbeat. "I'll catch you." Fear flickered in her eyes as she looked down, measuring the distance to the ground. "What if you don't? You're going to be brave, Leela." Ethan felt the weight of her fear, a tangible thing that resonated in the air. He had faced his own share of dangers on the ranch, climbing fences, wrestling with fences when the cattle got out, but this felt different. This was a child, lost in fright. Taking a deep breath, he moved closer to the tree. "Leela, look at me, just focus on my voice." For a moment she hesitated, but then steeled herself. She said softly, almost in disbelief. "Good." He pointed, his eyes locked onto hers. With a deep breath, she started to ease down. Ethan held his breath, praying she wouldn't lose her nerve. Each small movement felt like a lifetime. He could see her tiny fingers trembling as they clutched the branches. The air was thick with anticipation, and for a fleeting moment they were wrapped in a cocoon of bravery mixed with fear. But then, a loud rustle broke the stillness, and Ethan's heart dropped. The shadows behind him seemed to move, something lurking beyond the trees. He turned, adrenaline coursing through him. He shouted, forcing himself to focus on her. The girl's face twisted in fear as she paused, her wide eyes darting toward the noise. She cried, gripping the branch tightly. "Yes, you can," he urged, his heart racing. Leela nodded, breathless, and continued to inch herself down. Suddenly, she lost her footing, and for a moment it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. He shouted, arms outstretched. She let go, and in a heartbeat he caught her, their bodies colliding as they hit the ground. They landed hard in the grass, a tangle of limbs in disbelief. She gasped, her eyes bright with wonder. Ethan exclaimed, relief flooding through him. They sat there for a moment, both catching their breath, the moon shining down like a trophy on their victory over fear. But just as the joy began to settle in, another growl erupted from the woods, deep and rumbling. Ethan shot up, tension snapping through him like a taut string. He commanded, adrenaline pushing him into overdrive. He looked over his shoulder at the source of the sound. Shadows flickered, and something large seemed to move just out of reach. She whispered, clinging tightly to his leg, eyes wide with fear. Ethan forced himself to remain calm. "It's okay." He steadied himself, preparing for anything that might emerge from the dark. At first, he saw only the glint of eyes reflecting the moonlight. His heart raced. Whatever was watching them was not far away. But then from out of the brush came not a predator, but a dog. A scruffy, lovable mutt with a wagging tail and an excited bark jumped forward, nearly knocking Leela over. Leela shrieked, laughing in relief as she crouched down to embrace her furry friend. Ethan chuckled, the tension dissipating almost instantaneously, replaced by pure joy at the sight of her unbridled happiness. Yes, Leela's laughter was contagious, lifting the weight that had hung over them only moments before. "Looks like you both had quite an adventure," Ethan said, still catching his breath. She said, her eyes sparkling like stars. "Of course I did, and you were really brave, Leela." He laughed, pumping her small fist in the air. As they began to walk back toward the barn, Leela's laughter rang like music through the night. Max trotted beside them, leading the way with his tail wagging like a flag. She said, glancing up at Ethan with pure admiration. "Honestly, you did the real rescuing," he replied, a warm smile lighting his face. "You faced your fear and trusted me." She asked, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Sure, but first let's get you home. Your parents must be worried sick," Ethan said, switching gears, feeling a sense of purpose washing over him. As they walked, he shared stories about the ranch, the adventures he had gotten into while herding cattle, and the close calls he faced with wild animals. Leela listened with wide eyes, hanging onto every word as if he were spinning the biggest tale of all time. Just as they neared the barn, Leela turned to him, her expression serious. "Anything," he replied, his heart warm with affection for the little girl who had shown him bravery in its purest form. Ethan knelt to meet her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. "I promise, but you have to remember." With a smile spreading across her face, Leela clasped his hand tightly as they stepped into the barn. The familiar sense of hay and leather wrapped around them like a warm embrace, calming their racing hearts. As they entered, big beams of light poured through the barn doors, illuminating the space. Leela gazed around at the warmth of home, a sanctuary that had been waiting for them both. "Thank you, Ethan," she said again, her voice small but filled with gratitude. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he said modestly, but deep inside he felt the glow of heroism nestled within the ordinary. She eagerly asked, looking up at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Absolutely. This will be a story for the ages," Ethan replied, laughter bubbling between them as they imagined sharing their adventure with the other ranch hands and Leela's parents. As they settled into the barn, Ethan realized something profound. Life on the ranch had always been about working hard, facing the elements, and respecting the land. But tonight had unfolded in a way that reminded him of the deeper connections that life holds, the importance of courage, companionship, and the unexpected paths that lead to moments of profound growth. Leela curled up beside Max as Ethan shared more stories, new dreams igniting in her young heart. Each tale deepened the bond they had formed under such unlikely circumstances, weaving them into the larger tapestry of life on Cedar Creek. And as the stars twinkled outside, Ethan couldn't help but feel that in rescuing Leela, he had found something as well, a reminder that even amid darkness, light can shine through, illuminating paths for those brave enough to seek it. They had both faced their fears that night, emerging not just victorious but transformed. In the depths of the woods, a cry had turned into a story, a human connection anchored in bravery, forever lighting the way home. The sun had just sunk behind the hills, leaving a twilight glow over Cedar Creek Ranch. Ethan, a seasoned ranch hand with hands hardened from years of work, leaned against the barn, savoring the last moments of daylight. The air was thick with the smell of hay and earth, a comforting scent that felt like home. He listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch, the rustle of the wind through the tall grass, the distant calls of coyotes, and the clucking of chickens settling in for the night. But then, slicing through the tranquility, he heard it, a soft, unsettling cry. At first he thought he might be imagining things. After all, the woods could have all sorts of wildlife making noises at this hour. Yet the sound persisted, a small, shrill whimper that tugged at something deep inside him. Ignoring the instinct to brush it off, he straightened up, curiosity intertwining with worry. He called out, his voice cutting through the evening silence. There was no response, just the echo of his own call. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself away from the barn and stepped into the dense underbrush. As he moved deeper into the trees, the familiar ranch sounds faded away, replaced by an eerie silence punctuated only by that gut-wrenching cry. Each step felt heavier, as if the shadows were closing in around him, wrapping him in a cautious embrace. He shouted, the urgency in his voice sending a chill through the air. The only answer was another cry, more frantic and desperate. Ethan hesitated for just a moment, his instincts clashing with the urge to help. But ultimately, the pull to rescue whoever or whatever was in trouble drove him forward. He hadn't spent years tending to cattle and mending fences just to shy away from a cry for help. Pushing through the underbrush, he fought against the growing darkness. The moon hung low, casting a silvery light that barely penetrated the thick canopy above. And then he stumbled upon a small clearing where a massive oak tree stood sentinel. His breath caught in his throat as he looked up. High in the branches, tangled in the leaves, was a small girl. No older than 10, her blonde hair was disheveled and her eyes glistened with tears. She clutched the branch as if it were her lifeline. "Hey!" Ethan shouted, his heart racing. The girl looked down at him, her face a mix of fear and bewilderment. She cried, her small voice laced with desperation. "Okay, don't worry," he said, trying to keep his own anxiety at bay. "Leela," she replied, her voice trembling. "All right, Leela, I'm Ethan. You've got to try to climb down a bit." Her voice broke and Ethan could see the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know you are, but you're not alone. You can do this. Just take a deep breath," he encouraged, squinting up at her through the leaves. Leela clung to the branch, fear radiating from her small frame. She whispered. Ethan replied, trying to instill some semblance of courage into her. "Just take your time. Look at me." For a moment he thought she might not respond, but in her wide, scared eyes he saw a flicker of determination. "Yeah," she finally whispered, surprising herself. "Good, now can you move down a little?" He could see the conflict on her face, and he knew this wasn't just about climbing down from a tree. This was about trusting and taking a leap of faith. Slowly, she began to inch her way down. Ethan held his breath, watching every small shift she made. Each movement felt like a small victory, yet the darkness around them thickened and the woods felt alive with unseen dangers. But then came a loud rustling from the nearby bushes, sending a shock wave of fear through Ethan. "Lila," he urged, fighting the rising panic in his chest. She hesitated, and Ethan could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. "No," she sobbed, her small body trembling more violently now. "Yes, you can. You've come so far." Ethan shouted, feeling a mix of desperation and urgency. With one final shudder, Leela nodded, realizing her only choice lay in trusting him. She shifted again, inching closer to the edge. "On 3, jump into my arms," Ethan instructed, locking his gaze on her. She let go. Time seemed to stand still as she fell, and he rushed forward, arms outstretched like a net waiting to catch her. He felt the impact, her small body colliding against him with a rush of breath. They tumbled to the ground, rolling away from the oak tree. Leela gasped, wide-eyed, disbelief etched on her face. "Yes." Ethan laughed, relief flooding through him. They both lay there, heartbeats racing as the night settled around them like a warm blanket. But just as triumph began to wash over him, a deep growl echoed through the woods, freezing both of them in place. He urged, adrenaline surging back into his veins. He turned, eyes scanning the darkness around them, dread pooling in his stomach. Shadows moved beyond the trees, and something big was lurking just out of sight. Leela whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan forced himself to remain calm. He positioned himself protectively in front of her, ready to shield her from whatever danger lay ahead. Just then, out of the shadows, a large canine figure emerged, a scruffy dog with a friendly wagging tail and a goofy bark. It bounded toward them and almost knocked Leela over with excitement. She squealed, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around the dog. Ethan released a breath he didn't realize he was holding, surprised by the warmth flooding back into the situation. He said, smiling at Leela, whose face lit up like the sun. "Yeah," Leela exclaimed, joy radiating from her small frame as Max licked her face. "Looks like you both had quite an adventure," Ethan remarked, glancing around the clearing, grateful that they were safe for now. As Leela hugged her puppy tightly, Ethan's protectiveness began to fade, replaced with an appreciation for the bond they shared. Leela had faced her fears, and so had he, in a way facing the unknown, stepping into the darkness to find a light. He looked around at the woods that had seemed so menacing just moments ago. "All right, Leela, let's head back to the ranch." As they made their way back, Leela talked a mile a minute, recounting her earlier adventure, how she had climbed the tree and then ended up crying, not knowing if anyone would come for her. Ethan listened intently, his heart swelling with pride for how brave she had been, how she had taken that leap of faith to jump into the unknown. He asked, his tone filled with warmth. "No," Leela said, her face glowing with trust and admiration. As they neared the barn, the lights shone brightly, welcoming them back like old friends. The familiar sounds of the ranch embraced them, the whinny of horses, the soft rustle of hay, and the gentle breeze whispering through the trees. "Thanks for rescuing me, Ethan," Leela said, looking up at him with sincerity. "Heroes can come in all shapes and sizes," he replied with a chuckle. "But let's be real, you were the brave one tonight, Leela. You climbed that tree, faced your fear, and jumped." When they reached the barn, Ethan gently knelt beside her. "What you did tonight is something you can always carry with you. Remember, it's okay to feel scared sometimes." Leela nodded, her eyes glistening with newfound understanding. "I'll remember. Definitely. This is a story worth sharing," he agreed, feeling a sense of camaraderie building between them. As they settled inside the barn, it hit him just how lucky they both were, how a simple cry in the woods had turned into a night filled with unexpected bravery, friendship, and a bond that would carry them beyond the boundaries of fear. Leela asked, curling beside Max, who lay at her feet. "Absolutely. Life is full of surprises, especially in the great outdoors. You've got to be ready for anything," Ethan said, smiling as he thought of all the stories yet to come. That night, as they shared laughter and tales of their bravery, Ethan felt a warmth in his heart that was all-encompassing. They had faced fears together, emerged from darkness into light, and created a memory that would last a lifetime. And as the moon rose high in the sky, illuminating the barn and those inside, they found comfort in knowing that even in darkness, you could always find a way back home if you had hope and courage leading the way. Their adventure had shown them not just the strength of their own spirits, but also the magic born from connection and the power of kindness to turn fear into triumph. The global village outside still hummed with life creatures stirring, the wind singing through the trees. But here, inside the barn, time felt suspended, safe from the outside world. And together, they spun dreams filled with bravery and hope, forever echoing through the hills of Cedar Creek Ranch. The stillness of twilight wrapped around Cedar Creek Ranch like a warm blanket, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Ethan leaned against the fence, his rugged hands resting on weathered wood, feeling the soft breeze brush against his face. The long day of work was finally coming to an end, but just as calm settled in, a soft, haunting cry broke through the evening air. At first, it was subtle, almost as if he was imagining it. Then came another. It twisted in his gut, a pang of urgency. It was unmistakably human, a small, desperate sound echoing from the woods that lined the edge of the ranch. Ethan's heart raced. Someone or something was in trouble. He pushed away from the fence, instinctively focusing on the sound. He called out, the words swallowed by the encroaching darkness. That pit in his stomach deepened, worry gnawed at him. Ignoring it, he stepped away from the safety of the light, plunging into the shadows. The world metamorphosed around him as he moved forward, the natural sounds of the ranch fading away into an eerie silence. Each step sent vibrations of dread through the soles of his boots. Ethan slipped through the thicket, branches scratching against his arms, claws of the night reaching out to grab him. He shouted, desperation seeping into his voice. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the crying grew louder, a raw wail that clawed at his heart. "Hang on," he urged, adrenaline surging through him, propelling him forward. His breath quickened, anticipation mingling with anxiety. What sort of trouble had he stumbled upon? Suddenly, he broke into a clearing, moonlight flooding the area, illuminating an ancient oak tree at its center. And there, perched high among the branches, was a small girl, her blonde hair shimmering like gold under the moonlight. Tears streaming down her cheeks, she clutched the branch tightly. Ethan shouted, his voice erupting with concern. "What are you doing up there?" she cried, her small body trembling as she looked down at him, panic swirling in her blue eyes. "Okay, don't worry," he shouted back, trying to soothe her fear. She exclaimed, her voice choked with sobs. "All right, Leela, I'm Ethan. Can you try to climb down a little bit?" She sobbed, her fingers white-knuckled around the branch. Ethan felt his heart ache at the sight of her terror. "I know you're scared, but you're not alone. Just look at me. I'll be right here," he said, furrowing his brow. Leela hesitated, her small body shaking as she weighed her options, but he could see a flicker of resolve in her wide eyes, a glimmer of hope igniting deep within her. Taking a deep breath, she nodded slowly, gaining the courage to move. "Good, just remember, one step at a time," Ethan urged, keeping his eyes locked on hers. With shaky limbs, she began to inch down the branch, and Ethan held his breath, every heartbeat echoing the tension in the air. But every movement felt like an eternity as the shadows danced ominously around him. Then, from the depths of the woods came an ominous rustle. A chill crept up Ethan's spine as his instincts screamed at him. "Layla!" he shouted, an edge of panic slipping into his voice. The girl flinched, her fear escalating, freezing her in place. She cried, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her face. Ethan implored, urgency clawing at his throat. Just a little more. With determination etched on her face, Leela shifted again, fear and resolve battling in her small heart. Ethan called, his heart racing. 1, 2. She let go, and in an instant he caught her, the small weight colliding against him as they fell to the ground. They landed hard in the grass, the impact rattling him to his core. She gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes," Ethan exclaimed, relief flooding through him. They lay there for a moment, both breathless under the moonlit sky, a cosmic victory in the stillness of the night. But just as he began to relax, the very tension that had passed suddenly returned. A guttural growl echoed through the trees, making Ethan's heart leap into his throat. He shot up, adrenaline surging through him like a tidal wave. He commanded, turning to face the unseen threat. Leela whispered, trembling. "I don't know yet," he replied, feeling the weight of their predicament. "But I'm here." With Leela gripping tightly to his side, he stood tall, ready to protect her from whatever came next. The growl rolled through the dark trees again, closer this time, vibrating the ground beneath his feet. Then from the thick shadows, a figure emerged. A large dog, mouth open in a pant, tongue lolling out. It bounded toward them with wild excitement, its tail whipping through the air. Ethan laughed in relief as Leela burst into tears of joy. She shrieked, dropping to her knees as the dog lunged toward her, licking her face with exuberant happiness. Ethan asked, kneeling beside her, still catching his breath. She exclaimed, the worry dissipating as she hugged Max tightly. "It looks like you both had quite an adventure," Ethan said, chuckling softly, gratitude flooding through him. Amid the chaos of fear and darkness, the bond between Leela and her dog illuminated the night. Feeling lighter, Ethan wanted to ensure they made it back to safety. "Okay, Leela, we need to get back to the ranch. Your folks must be worried sick," he said, glancing around at the trees that had felt so daunting just a moment ago. As they began to walk back, Leela's spirit shone through her words. She asked, joy radiating from her small face, brightening the chilly night. "Absolutely," Ethan replied, the warmth of their shared experience filling the air. Their laughter echoed through the woods, blending with the gentle rustle of the leaves. Leela asked, her innocent curiosity tugging at him. "Well," Ethan said, smiling down at her, "from what I just saw, there aren't many people brave enough to climb down from a tree when they're scared." Leela giggled, her laughter ringing out like a song, and for a moment, all the fear they'd faced seemed a distant memory. As they neared the barn, the comforting glow of lights flickered in the doorway. The ranch felt like a haven, a bubble of warmth against the chill that clung to the night. When they stepped inside, Leela's eyes sparkled, taking in the familiar surroundings. She squealed, bounding toward her mother, who was just stepping out of the back room. Her mother gasped, surprise flooding her face. "I was so worried." "It's okay, Mom," Ethan observed from the side, allowing the warmth of the reunion to envelop him. Leela had stepped into the engulfing arms of her mother, their embrace telling a story of relief and love. "Leela, you can't go off like that," her mom exclaimed, her voice trembling with relief and concern. Leela pointed excitedly, beaming up at him. "He rescued me." Ethan stepped forward, a small smile gracing his face. "I was just lucky to be nearby, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat politely. Her mother looked at him, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Thank you for finding her." Her voice trailed off, replaced by emotion. "It was my pleasure," Ethan replied, feeling warmth bloom in his chest. As the family settled back into the barn, Leela danced around, recounting every detail of their adventure, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ethan found himself caught between the joy of the family reunion and the weight of the earlier fear that had brought them together. After a while, Leela turned to Ethan, her expression shifting. She asked, a touch of vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Absolutely. You've got a brave heart, Leela," he said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Just remember that whenever you feel scared, you can face it head-on." As he left the barn, the warm memories of laughter and bravery echoed in his ears. The sky had shifted to a velvety navy, stars twinkling like diamonds overhead. As Ethan stepped outside, he felt a sense of purpose fueling his spirit. He had entered the woods that night, guided by a voice wailing in the dark, and emerged with more than just a story. He had forged an unbreakable bond, one rooted in trust, courage, and friendship. Those moments of bravery reminded him of the connections that run deeper than fear, how they could illuminate the darkest corners of life with the simplest acts of kindness and trust. From that day on, the woods didn't seem so daunting. He would return, embracing the lessons learned, the importance of facing fears, of listening to cries for help, and the undeniable magic that emerges when courage leads the way home. As he walked toward the horizon, the stars above became a symphony of lights, a reminder that no one truly faces the dark alone. Together, they can find a way back, leaning on each other's hearts to illuminate even the deepest woods. The sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the expansive Cedar Creek Ranch. Evening settled in with a hush, wrapping the land in golden hues before the stars would take their place in the vast sky. Ethan, a seasoned ranch hand, leaned against the wooden fence, the familiar sense of hay and fresh earth clinging to him like a second skin. Just another day coming to an end, he thought, brushing a hand through his tousled hair. But then he heard it, a faint but unmistakable sound rising from the woods at the edge of the property. A whimper, almost like a child's desperate plea. Cut through the evening calm and sent a chill racing down his spine. Ethan straightened up, his instincts kicking in. Was someone lost out there? He pushed off the fence and began to walk toward the source of the crying. The ranch had its share of wildlife, but this cry was different. It was filled with raw emotion, a deep sense of need that was hard to ignore. As he stepped into the denser part of the woods, the soft rustle of leaves beneath his boots felt painfully loud in the profound silence of the twilight. He called out, his voice wavering a bit. The only reply was the echo of his own words, spiraling into the darkness. The crying became clearer, a heart-wrenching sound that jolted him forward, urging him deeper into the woods. Pushing through the brush, he fought against growing apprehension. Each step felt heavier under the weight of uncertainty. He could feel the night closing around him, wrapping him in shadows as he ventured farther from the safety of the barn. "Stay calm," he murmured to himself, his heart pounding not just from fear, but from a fierce instinct to protect. Suddenly, he broke into a small clearing bathed in moonlight. At its center stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching up like twisted fingers toward the stars. And there, tangled among the limbs, was a figure. A small girl, no older than 10, clung desperately to the thick branch, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. "What are you doing up there?" The girl looked down, her eyes wide with fear. She sobbed, her voice trembling. He replied, taking a moment to assess the situation. "Leela," she whispered, her small voice barely audible amongst the rustling leaves. "All right, Leela, I'm Ethan. I'm going to help you down." Ethan scanned the tree. It was tall and intimidating, but he had enough experience climbing trees himself to know that with courage, she might be able to do it. Leela shook her head fiercely, fear etched across her tiny face. "It's too high." "Listen to me," he said, his heart racing as he kept his gaze focused on her. "You are not alone. Just take a deep breath. I'm right here." Her gaze locked onto his, uncertainty dancing in her eyes. "I promise," he replied, praying she could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Look at me, Leela, you can do this." After a moment that felt like an eternity, she nodded, her small hands gripping the branch tightly. "Good," he urged, keeping a steady tone. With tentative movements, Leela began to inch her way down. Ethan's heart raced, each small step she took sending waves of hope through him. But the shadows around them seemed to grow thicker, the world outside the clearing slipping further into darkness. He encouraged, holding his breath, admiring her bravery. Then, just as she was about to step onto a lower branch, a sudden rustling from the underbrush froze them both in place. Ethan's instincts flared into high alert. "Leela, please." The girl's fear surged and she clutched the branch tighter, panic filling her eyes. "I can't." "Yes, you can. Just look at me," he urged, his heart pounding louder in his ears. With a burst of determination, Leela shifted her weight and stepped down carefully. Ethan felt a rush of relief as she moved, but then he heard the sound again. The growl, deep and menacing, flowing through the trees like a threatening shadow. "Leela, jump," he shouted, arms wide open, heart pounding with urgency. She asked, panic lacing her voice. "Absolutely, just jump on the count of 3, 1, 2. She let go and time seemed to slow as she fell. Ethan lunged forward, arms stretched wide, and caught her just as they both hit the ground. They tumbled together in the grass, hearts pounding as they landed in a heap. "Did we?" Leela gasped, her wide eyes filled with disbelief. "Yes." Ethan laughed, relief flooding through him like a long-lost warmth. They lay there for a moment, breathless under the shimmering moonlight, triumph coursing through their veins. But the serenity shattered when the growl erupted again, louder this time, shaking the quiet night. Ethan commanded, adrenaline kicking in once more. He could feel the urgency knotting in his stomach. He turned to face the source of the sound, ready to protect the small girl he had just saved from the treetops. Leela whispered, her voice shaky with fear. Ethan's heart pounded as he scanned the darkness. "I don't know yet, but we're going to face it together." The growling continued, echoing ominously, growing louder as the creature approached. Then out of the darkness, a shadow loomed, a large form moving effortlessly through the trees. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. Was it an animal? His mind raced through all the dangers that could be lurking just out of sight. It stepped into the moonlight and relief flooded through him. It was only a dog, a large, scruffy mutt with friendly eyes and a wagging tail. He bounded toward them, almost knocking Leela over as he jumped with joy. "Max!" Leela squealed, laughter spilling out of her as she sank to her knees amid a whirlwind of fur and excitement. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, grateful that it wasn't something more dangerous. The bond between the girl and her dog brought warmth back into the chilly night. "Looks like you both went on quite an adventure," he said, smiling as the dog licked Leela's face. "Yeah, I was playing with him and then I got scared and climbed the tree," she explained, beaming with joy. "Okay, enough adventure for one night. Let's get back to the ranch before more excitement finds us," Ethan suggested, glancing around, his protective instincts urging him forward. Leela asked, her voice filled with enthusiasm as she held Max tightly against her. Ethan replied, the thrill of their journey igniting a sense of camaraderie between them. As they made their way back, Leela's laughter filled the air, a sweet antidote to the fear they just navigated. She exclaimed, joy spilling out of her. "More like I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time," Ethan said, his heart swelling with pride for both of them. Finally, they reached the familiar path back to the ranch. Safety lay just ahead, but something tugged at Ethan's gut. It was a feeling he couldn't quite shake. He urged, taking Leela's small hand in his. As they entered the barn, bright lights illuminated the area, revealing a sense of security. Leela's mother rushed toward them, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "Leela, where have you been?" "I was playing with Max," Leela shouted, her eyes twinkling with excitement. Ethan watched the reunion, his heart warmed by the emotional embrace. The mother pulled Leela close, holding her tight. "He did it," Leela exclaimed, beaming at Ethan, her little hero. As they stood together, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the barn in deeper shadows. Ethan felt a rush of gratitude flooding through him. He had faced fears tonight, his own and Leela's. "Thank you for saving her," Leela's mom said, turning to Ethan, her voice filled with emotion. "It was nothing," he replied, feeling a warmth swell within him. As Leela chatted animatedly, recounting the details of their adventure, Ethan felt the shadows around him grow thicker. Something in the air shifted, a sense of unease creeping back in. He couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure wasn't quite over yet. And then he heard it, the faintest whisper of a growl echoing through the woods once more, reverberating against the barn walls. Something lurked just outside, watching, waiting. The protective instinct surged back into him. "Leela, stay close," he said, tension coiling in the pit of his stomach, eyes scanning the doorway. Leela asked, confusion flickering across her face. "I don't know." "Just stay behind me," he instructed, turning to face the dark expanse beyond the barn door. The growl rumbled again, low and menacing, stronger this time, sending a shiver down his spine. His heart raced as he fingered the knife he kept tucked in his belt. The air filled with an electric tension, the night thick with impending danger. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant howling of the wind. Then came the sound of thudding footsteps approaching, drawing nearer with each adrenaline-filled second. Ethan's body tensed, ready for whatever was about to emerge from the darkness. He felt Leela press close behind him, her small hand gripping his shirt tightly. And then it appeared, a shadow breaking through the doorway, illuminated by the barn's light. A feral, wild creature, eyes glinting like daggers under the moonlight, stood poised before them. The night crackled with anticipation as Ethan prepared to face whatever was lurking in the dark. The growl echoed through the air, a haunting promise of the danger that lay ahead. It had only just begun.